Welcome to the Fall 2020 Ladies Big Book Study Recording Series. My name is Kimberly and I am a recovered alcoholic. I am the facilitator of a tri-weekly Big Book Study for ladies only, and we record each session so we can share the knowledge along with you. What we do is we read the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous line by line. We pause on each page and have discussion time to share our experience, our strength, and our hope on each page. You are more than welcome to follow along in this series and do the work of the steps of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you do need support at any time, please reach out to me in the Contact Us area of my YouTube channel, and we're happy to provide you with support. The online recordings are open to men and women. Do not be discouraged, gentlemen. Our ladies' point of view may offer you a different perspective. So welcome. I hope you enjoy. All right, ladies, we're continuing on in the bottom of page 77. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. We are there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the results. Double underlined on that one. His faults are not discussed, and I actually circled his because, of course, all my exes wronged me, so it was their fault. But no, we don't discuss their faults. We stick to our own. And I hear this a lot, especially when people are reciting their fours. They're still stuck in that column 1 did me wrong, column 2 was how they did me wrong. And so they somehow tie column 3 and 4 to that column 1 and 2. So by this time, we should be looking at this from an entirely different angle. That is from self going out. So we should be able to see what harm we've done through our conduct, which our conduct is as a result of our fears. This takes some practice. This is why we highly recommend doing those small amends first, those easy ones in that first column, because usually those are not people who have harmed us. Those are just people we've harmed, mom, dad, sister, brother, whatever, neighbor, babysitter, so that we gradually get into those people that have done us wrong. Obviously, my ex-husband was not my first amends I did. And I disagree big time with people who recommend you do the big ones first. The reason I disagree with that wholeheartedly is because you're going to screw it up. Not you might screw it up, but you're going to screw it up. Why? Because you haven't had the baby steps practice. They don't throw you in the NHL the day after you learn how to lace up your skates. Why? Because you need to acquire a whole whack of skills and coaching before you can play in the big leagues. If you're just going and knocking off that big, huge amends first off, it's not going to go well. Because this is a program of casual, slow learning. We don't just all of a sudden become these amazing spiritual beings who say and do the right thing at all times. Heck, some of us never get to that place. So we need to take those baby steps and practice these amends and have a few small ones go sideways before we go to that big fish that really did us wrong. Right? My first amends should not be my narcissistic ex-husband who is going to chop me down at the kneecaps as I'm trying to set right my rights, because I'm telling you right now, that's what he's going to do. So we need to start with those little ones. We need to see the progress. We need to learn these principles and be practicing them and have God fully involved in our lives before we go do the big fish amends. Mom and dad, I like to recommend those ones first. Yes, we've done a lot of harm to mom and dad, But moms and dads are going to love us unconditionally 9 times out of 10. Not always. I understand there is some family shit that goes on. But like my mom, I thought I'd never do that in Mads, and it ended up being really easy. And she was just so happy that I was trying to make my life better. And she wanted nothing more than to see me do well. I was like, how, like for my mom, I was like, Mama, how can I fix this? And she's like, you just keep raising your kids right and keep doing well. That's all I want. So that gave me that little bit of confidence that I could go do the next amends. And with that amends, it gave me a little more confidence so I could do that next amends. That's how it's layered, and we build up that so that when we have a few that kind of go a little sideways, where someone kind of goes, yeah, we get a little bit of a tool in our toolbox so that eventually we're ready to do that big fish amends, right? Because that one's tough, and we need to have had all these little experiences in between. Diane. Whoops, I muted you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. It's funny because I guess I love the line you said about our conduct is a result of our fears. It's like my whole crazy life has been just this. I feel like I've been compressed, and I was just waiting to begin. It's the weirdest feeling. Like I had all these doors open and close and open and close. I never went through any of them. I went through one or two, but I was so fearful. And I feel like my resentments are really mostly at me, for being for ruining really good potential in my life. So, and my mom and dad were maybe you heard me speak because I know my voice is one of those voices that people remember. They think I'm a guy. Well, I was like, no, I'm not a guy because I have a deep voice. But my resentment is really towards myself. And then how could I have hurt my mom and dad, who were like just World War II, hardworking, fun-loving, just incredible people. And I was just quite an alcoholic, and I'd be in and out of their house, and I had like minimal jobs. I actually worked in a print shop for 14 years. Why? Because I could come in late, and I had health insurance, and I could drink. You see, I could drink, and I thought, my God, that's a job for someone who's not all there. And I guess I wasn't all there. So my resentments are just, I am so stuck because you said one other thing that's super important to me today. You got to do the work. And I do no work towards it. I say I'm too nervous. I can't do anything. I'm just frozen with anxiety. And that is an excuse that's not acceptable because I go nowhere except closer to maybe drinking. I don't want to drink again, really, because I'm smart enough to remember that if I feel isolated now, man, am I going to feel isolated if I start drinking again. So my resentments are really mostly laden at myself, and it's a little more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. When all said and done, I'm like, damn, Diane, how did I get stuck with you? So that's what I wanted to just share. How do I need to start working harder? I admit that, I put that on the table, and B, my resentments are towards myself and my parents who are gone from 2015. I want to tell them so badly how I adored them. They knew it. I took care of them the last year and a half, and they know I loved them, but I never said I was sorry about the drinking. We had never talked about anything. And I'm an advocate now for what you're talking about, which is when possible, make amends to people. Say outright, I'm sorry I drank. Can I tell you something funny? When I went to a meeting, I was actually embarrassed to tell them that I was going to a meeting. They're like, oh, where are you going? I'm like, oh, I'm just going out. And it's like, alcoholism embarrassed me. And I guess, so that's really, in a nutshell, pretty simple, but my making amends is to two people that aren't here anymore. And I know they adored me and I adored them, but it was so dysfunctional. And anyway, that's that. It's kind of, I hope that fits the theme and the topic.
Of course. And if you want to practice like little tiny things with this, amends include changed behavior. So if you want to really practice this in a day and see where you are, lead with kindness. Go out of your way to open doors for people, to say please and thank you when you're in public. The little amends as you go through your day. If you're on your cell phone at the grocery store checkout, I check myself. That's rude. this person deserves my full attention. And I stopped myself. I said, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have been on my cell phone. And just that look this check person gives you, that you've actually humanized them, it shows you the importance of amends. You know, opening the door for somebody and holding it open, and that appreciation they give to you. It shows you that importance of those little things to make people feel personed, that you've seen them. And that's just, do it for a day. See what you're like. Because I'll tell you, I was a big old bitch. Selfish and self-centered going through my day. Oh, well, you know, you're just ringing through my... I worked at a fucking grocery store. I put my phone down. I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I really think it's rude when people are on their phone when you're checking out. And then ask them how they are. That's part of these living amends in our behavior shifts. And it really works. And you'll take a little look at yourself at the end of the day and you're like, wow. Anne Marie.
Hi, Anne Marie again, still an alcoholic. Yeah, I spoke with, I had a sponsee who had a rather, well, like semi-heavy, if you want, amends to make. And the person lived like at the other end of the country, so she was going to do it by mail rather than by phone. And what I suggested to her was that, yeah, she write down the letter, but she read it to me before she sent it off, just to make sure that she was making amends for her behavior and not getting into, you know, and the wording and all that. And she appreciated that. And we were able to sort of tweak the letter a little bit so that she understood what she was doing a little bit better, you know, because I do believe that some of the amends or some of the people are scary, right? And you need whatever moral support you can get to walk into whatever room and or dial whatever number and actually make that amends. So use your sponsor. That's what we're for.
Absolutely. Lucia.
Lucia, alcoholic. I personally don't like putting anything in writing, and I'll tell you why from a personal experience. I put an amends in a letter one time, and I ran it by somebody, and everything sounded good and fine, and then it was used in court against me. You know, as a, I guess, to show my character. So at any time where something is possible to do it directly, I highly suggest it be done directly. And the book does say whenever possible, you know, it's direct. But that's just my thanks.
Absolutely. And I agree. I dislike written amends big time. The only time I tell my sponsees written amends are appropriate is if you cannot find the person, cannot find them, or they are dead. And I'm pretty savvy and can find people. I mean, most of us here are stalkers and crazy ex-girlfriends. We know how to find people. I mean, come on. Like, I can find out a lot of stuff with Google. But yeah, I am hugely against written amends. Number one, I don't think that they're from the heart. They're scripted. And number two is you need to make that in person. If it's a means of a phone call, you know, I mean, if you look at Laughing Bear, he lives in Alaska and he gets on meetings by ham radio, you know. I'm sure he can find a way to find someone as well. The only time I've ever done a written amends is to someone who's dead. Personally, I think at the very least a phone call is appropriate. I'm not suggesting you fly to Scotland and hike up a mountain or whatever the case may be, but most people are accessible by phone, and I shy away from those written amends, and like Lucia said, they can be used against you. You know, and you could think that person got that letter, and they may not have gotten that letter. So there you think you've done it, and you're assuming you're good, and you run into the person at the coffee shop, and you're like, hey, and they're like gonna come at you because they think that nothing's changed, and you're like, oh, but I sent you a letter. I'm sure they're not going to give a hoot. So direct, if possible. I lost track. Leslie?
Yeah. Hi, Leslie, alcoholic. I write everything down, and it's a way of purging my, like, just putting my thoughts, my feelings on paper, and I just learned it in school, and part of it was just since being a nurse and doing a lot of charting, and then with my husband when he was sick with cancer. I wrote everything down. For me, it was therapy when I had my brain injury to write everything down, how I was, my thoughts, what I was doing, what I was feeling, thinking and everything. But it's funny. The other day, I wrote something on paper twice now. One letter I gave to my husband, and that was before I had gone out to Kamloops for Halloween, and I wrote it, and I was going to give it to him before I left, and I thought, no, I felt sorry for the old bugger, and so I didn't, and then we were having a discussion when I came home, and I gave him the letter, and I did not reread it. I just poured my thoughts down on paper, and that's it. And so he read it, and he said, I agree with absolutely everything you wrote. I said, okay. And I left it at that, and I walked away. No discussion about it. The other day, I was writing I didn't realize it was a step 4. But I got my counselor or my sponsor to read it, and she says, this is a step 4. And I says, yeah, I guess it is. I didn't realize it, but he read it. And I kind of stopped in my tracks because he never reads anything I write. He's just kind of like in his own little world. And I just kind of stopped dead in my tracks, and I thought, uh-oh, what did I write? I just poured my heart out on the paper. And then he just asked me a few questions, and I said, I answered him, and that was that. And then I took it to my sponsor, and we looked it over, and she said, well, that's a step 4, and I hadn't done a step 4 with my husband. He was just kind of on the back burner from our last class. So I was glad I got that out and said what I had to say on paper. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Amy?
Hi, Kim. Thank you for this meeting. Your guidance here is invaluable. I was working on my amends previously with my last sponsor, and I remember just like trying to do as many as possible, as quickly as possible. And so if I couldn't get them on the phone, I would send a text, or, I was just trying to rush through them. And so I don't recommend that. It really bit me in the butt. But I'm so glad that we're going over this because I'm getting ready to redo my step 8 here soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Diane?
Hi. Just a quick follow-up. I really like what you said about the kindness, because that's, believe it or not, I get like, I use the word hi from just being nice to people. It's so much fun. I do photography, so I once wanted to do a book called Strangers Are My Hobby, because I like to meet strange, unusual people, and just like that. I call it, Gloriana used the word vignette, and I feel like the way my life has been, it's not all done. It's been a lot of little vignettes tossed in, and I think the kindness is like extraordinarily wonderful. And as far as you talk about making amends to people that are gone, and with my mom and dad, that's one of the reasons I stay sober. I said, you know what? It's for them too. That's one of the few, there's a list of reasons, obviously, but that is my amend to them to stay sober. So I just wanted to add that into this discussion. Thank you very much, and thank you. Really, you're like, I feel like you're an extraordinary leader and asset, whatever you want to call yourself. But I don't want to embarrass you, but thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, and with people who are passed, like, this can be just as lighting a candle and sitting quietly in a room and just talking to them. Or you could go to the gravesite and sit on a blanket and talk to them. Whatever you feel in your heart is right. You don't have to sit and pen a letter and, go to the ocean and burn it and scatter that. Like, it doesn't have to be ceremonial. It's meant to just purify it, get it out, and make that amends to them. They're with you spiritually, in my opinion. So however you like to do it, right? And now I keep Ray close, and we co-parent with him and his spirit, and I complain about the kids to him all the time, and it's good. Joanne.
There we go. Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm an alcoholic addict. This is great listening to. What comes to mind is on the 12th step where it says having had a spiritual awakening as the results of these steps. The spiritual awakening that I also believe in is my conscious contact with a higher power, but conscious contact with me. And you'll hear me say, the saying that I love is, we are women of dignity and honor today. And so I could be on Zoom right now, and instead of saying, I'm Joanne, I'm an alcoholic addict, I could text it, I could write it to you, and it conveys to you that information. But there's something very different about writing it on my screen saying Joanne, alcoholic addict, and putting my face up on the screen, having the world see me, and owning it. I'm owning it. I'm Joanne, and I suffer from the disease of alcoholism and addiction. I'm not alcohol and addiction, but I suffer from it, and I own it. And so when it comes to making an amends, I'm not drinking today due to the help of my higher power and the program of AA. I'm not drinking, and I'm trying hard not to stay in the illness, and I'm trying to clean up the wreckage of my past while I was living in the disease. So I have to I'm a woman of dignity and honor today, and I'm sober. And I also have to say those actions, while for some of them was under the influence, I regret. And see that person, give them, like what you're talking about, see that other person's humanness, and recognize that you are a human being and worth having someone say to them, I'm sorry I trashed your event. I regret this. The other thing I really want to say is, because when you're done, you're done. You're done, and you get to live your sober day, and it's just no longer, the weight on your shoulder, or that little piece that makes you want to not look those people in the eye. You're done. The other thing I want to say is, except when to do so would injure others. And I know Kimberly's heard it, but there's newer people in the room. I had an experience where my elderly father, I brought out to the garden, and everyone else had gone, and I thought to myself, this would be the time to mend and tell him why I've been so distant for so long. And the resentment was, you did not meet my expectation as a father. You did not meet my expectation. And it hurt so bad, and I just rejected you. And I'm looking at this frail old man in a wheelchair. And I thought to myself, why at this point, at 85 years old, should I tell this old man who had no clue that he failed me and that I was angry? And that's why I haven't been his daughter for years. It was, thank God, I heard that step in my head that said, except when to do so would injure them or others. And all I did is I took a deep breath, and I just sat with him, and I allowed myself to be present with my dad. And I continued to do that until he passed away. So it's really, really important to work with a sponsor and check your motives and be real clear, and then ask yourself, will this harm someone? Like, there is information that on some level, I would love to share with a sibling, but it would not improve her life. It would just break her heart. And then I would have to go make an amends for breaking her heart. And so I'm going to just skip that. Stay sober and just keep trying to do the right thing sober and stay in my own truth and be a woman of dignity and honor just for today. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And this is where it is so good to counsel with others, like Joanne said. There's lots of us here who have experience making tough amends, and some of us are really creative in coming up with solutions to things that we think are not able to be amended. And like Joanne said, her story with her dad, I had a sponsee who had a similar situation with her mom. And her mom is in a home and suffering from dementia. And, there was a financial amends that needed to be made, but it would have caused more harm and stress to a woman who's got dementia and doesn't understand, So I said, every Friday, send your mom a big bouquet of flowers. That's a financial amends. You're spending that money and you're bringing that joy to your mother's bedside. And that's all she needs. And that will make it right. To bring it up and to say, well, Mom, I pilfered all this money from you, is going to cause stress and harm and confusion. So why don't you bring some peace and joy to her life in her final days, right? And that's a creative amends we're able to make, where the sponsee felt that was the right course of action. Marianne, Toronto.
Hi, friends. I am an alcoholic from Toronto. My name's Marianne. Grateful to be here. Grateful to be sober today. So I found it really interesting with this paragraph. It's my direction on what to say in an amend. And at the end of it, it said, if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. And I find that very interesting because, as we'll read on, there's other things that can go, but it tells me here, if I say this in an amend and I stick to these instructions, I will be gratified with the result. I had one that I did. It wasn't taken that great. The woman said, no, I'll let you know. When I asked if I could make it right, I'll let you know. But I still came away gratified with the result because I followed this instruction. So it helps me with the expectation. Like, I won't have an expectation if I just follow these directions. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I just had an issue. Some people. Okie dokie. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. So 2 parts of that. The second I'm going to hit on first because the first has more conversation involved. If he throws you out of his office, if they say, no, fuck off, and they hang up, you have done your part. But you must keep the willingness to make that amends if that person's situation changes. That person may be going through something in their lives. That person may not be ready to hear your amends at that time. That does not mean that in 2 years you run into them in a coffee shop and they're in a different place and they make an amends to you for telling you to fuck off and you say, yeah, I was just calling because I needed to talk to you about some stuff, and, do you have time to have coffee? I was calling because, I really regret the way I treated you in our past, and I wanted to make it right. So just because they say fuck off and tell us to get the fuck out of their lives doesn't mean we're off the hook forever. We must remain willing to make any and all amends as they crop up. I disagree with those who say keep trying. That causes harm. That person's mom might be dying. That person's daughter might be going kidney dialysis, cancer treatment. Who knows? It's not the right time. Move on. Just stay willing. God has a way of making things happen, and will put that person in front of you when the time is right. So if they say go away, but remain willing. Now, 9 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. Since I've done this process this way, 10 times out of 10, the unexpected happens. I have been well received each and every time I made an amends. They have gone off beautifully when I've followed this format. When I did it the other way, it didn't go so well. But when I followed this format and I led with the heart, I let God guide me, and I promptly admitted my wrongs for the right reasons without pointing out other people's mistakes, they went off really well. And almost every time they're like, yeah, you know what? We've seen the change in you and we're so proud of you. You're doing so great. That has happened to me every time since I started practicing this program this way. Anne-Marie.
Hi, it's me again. What you said about the person's telling you to fuck off, that's if someone who doesn't want to even hear your amendment, right?
Yes.
But what if someone does hear it and doesn't accept it? It's the same situation, isn't it? You've still done your part.
You did your part.
You did your part.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't have to accept it. It's
Nope.
up to them.
You make it. If you sincerely, here's the thing. If I sincerely go and make an amends, and I sincerely regret the actions I've done, and I do not bring up their stuff, and I do not point fingers, I just own my shit, it goes off well. The only time it would not go off well is if I was somehow pointing the finger at them or somehow still holding some sort of attitude.
No, I just have to add a precaution here. That's not always the case. All right. When I made amends to my youngest brother, I did them too soon. I'll give you that. I did them too soon. So obviously they weren't done right. But it wasn't a question of me turning it around and saying, yeah, but you weren't very nice to me either. As soon as I started my amends, he went, yeah, well, we all know what you're like.
Yeah, because you said you just started it out. You weren't ready. And so you weren't there. If you follow this process and you've actually done this work, they will go off right. 100%. Yeah, 100%. I guarantee it. If it doesn't, you can come back to me and I will eat my words. But like what you led off with was you did them too soon and you didn't do them right. So you weren't there. And the reason number one, he called you out on your insincerity because he hadn't seen the change. If you followed this process the way we lay it out in the book and the way I teach it, the change is already being noticed in other people. It's impossible for it not to be noticed by other people at this point if you've done it right. You know, I've got people that we've been having in this group for 2 weeks, and I've already seen a change in the way they talk in one-on-one situations. People notice it, usually before we do. Joanne?
Yeah, I just really wanted to say that my daughter says this saying, like, what does done look like? And for me, I think of the reverse. If there's somebody in my, there was somebody in my life that in a drunken stupor abused me. And if he ever got sober and came to me, and even with me being in the program and understanding what that means, I can accept his amends. I don't necessarily have to forgive him. I don't have to um it's not up to him what I choose to do with that information. Okay? If he feels that it's important for him to say to make an amends, that's up to him. But I think we have to be very careful about our expectations. You know, the amends that I've made is this is what I'm going to do, and I turn the result over to my higher power. You know, the other thing that I wanted to say is it's really amazing sometimes when people do respond in kindness. That helps me just get another little piece of a sense of what forgiveness is. And if they can show me forgiveness, then I can learn how to forgive myself. And but I just wanted to really just be careful that you kind of, you know, I had a sponsor that used to say, what's the investment? And if you can work that out before you do it, it helps with the clarity so that you don't have in the back of your head, well, I did this and this should have went this way, because that's an expectation again that won't serve you. So anyways, that's what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bonnie T. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Yes, hi, my name's Bonnie. I'm an alcoholic. I've had two situations where I haven't been able to give an amends. And one of them is, it's going to probably sound ridiculous to everybody, but it's something that's haunted me for 35 years. And that was in a drunken stupor. I actually gave my dog to the SPCA. And I'm a total animal lover, and it hurts me to this day that I did that. And so what I did, I thought I have to make amends to this little dog, you know. So what I did was I ended up, when I came back to AA and I started this process, I thought, okay, the only thing I can do is I'm going to donate every month to the SPCA.
Yeah.
And that's the way I've been able to, you know, do the very best I can with the situation. The other one is my son. My son will not allow me to make an amends. He just brushes it off. He says, oh, he's a firefighter. So he says, oh, Mom, I've gone into houses. I go into houses all the time, and the kids that are being, the way they're treated in there, it was nothing like that for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He will not let me make an amends. And he's somebody I would love to be able to make amends to. So I was wondering what you think about that.
You're already making it by being the sober version of you. For our children, the biggest amends we can make our children is to be sober and to be present. It's more valuable than any words we could ever say. For a long time, my oldest daughter demanded an amends. She demanded an amends. You need to give me an amends. You're in AA. You need to do this and that and this and that. And now she's come to be kind of where your son is, where she's like, Mom, I understand you were doing the best you could with what you had, and I'm just so happy to have my mom sober. So for kids, that is the biggest amends we can be, is to be this new sober version of ourselves. That's all they want. You know, older kids, it can be a little stickier if you know, they've gone through 18 years and then we were drunks in their adulthood. But most of the time, our kids just want us to be their parents. And so if we're just showing up and being sober, you've made that amends. With the animals, yeah, 100%. But the one thing I will add, you know, besides donating to the SPCA, you could volunteer at the SPCA. But also know that you did right by that animal. right? And this comes with a little bit of self-forgiveness. You were probably a not so great pet owner, right? Your
Right.
pet
Yeah.
probably didn't get fed on time. Your pet probably got a little bit of neglect, maybe didn't get walked the way it would. So in other words, you did right by the dog by letting it have another chance at a better home. And that is the opposite for people who are adopted or people who give up children for adoption. A lot of people have that abandonment, and they forget that there is actually a piece of lovingness in being given up for adoption, where the parent is giving you a fresh chance at life with a new family. There's always different situations where sometimes the foster family or adopted family isn't that great, and so there can be resentments there. But knowing that the parent, or even here the dog, mom or dad, gave up that animal because they weren't able to care for it, and it wasn't anything that was just like throwing them away. Not to say anything, but one of my exes actually used to like get rid of animals in the forest. Like that's unhumane. But to donate the lovingly give that animal up for it to have a better opportunity, that's just self-forgiveness. Yeah.
Thanks, Kim. I have to say though, I have two of the most spoiled cats on the face of the earth now. So
Right? Yeah.
thanks.
No
very much.
problem. And a lot of the times in our addiction, in our alcoholism, we get animals to use them selfishly to fill a void because we're lonely. And so here we're selfishly getting this animal, and then we're not caring for it because we can barely care for ourselves. So we're doing this animal a favor by getting it to a home that's going to love it and care for it properly. Question privately in the chat is about abortion. That one, I personally don't have experience with it, but I do know other people in the group might have experience with it. And again, this might be a light a candle amends. I welcome anyone who has experience with that to put their hands up and share as well. Gloriana.
Hi, ladies. Hi, Kimberly. Everything is so wonderful on here, and what an incredible meeting. And it's going to help me get through the day. Yeah, all right. Well, first, amends. Written amends, I love what you said, and I'm going to share my experience. I did that with my brother when I first came into recovery, and it resulted in not speaking for 23 years, although, thank God, we speak. So written amends are not really a good thing. One time years ago, I was in a band with this really, very ill girl who was on a lot of drugs, a lot of cocaine and whatever, and she did a lot of creepy things to me. And then she called me, and I was in a very bad head, and I was like, "You've got the wrong number." So, that was like an example of being thrown out of an office. But I guess, listening to that, she did her part. There's no way I can even, who knows where she is, if she's alive now. But anyway, yeah, so I had a pet thing too. I had was in a really bad time in my marriage, with my first husband, and things were very dysfunctional. And I had a dog that was dying, and I felt bad because I was babysitting my neighbor's bully pit, and she was enormous, and she was more like the size of a boxer, but like solid as a pit, right? And she was not socialized properly, and I got her to walk, and she came along, and she really adjusted to him and I. And then when he left, she was traumatized, and then I had her alone, and I was going through some stressful times in sobriety, just trying to find roommates and trying to get by economically. And I lost control of her, and she alphaed me, and then she bit me in the face. It turned into this whole big production with, I was holding on to her because I was lonely. She was all I had. But I really, really, wanted to love her, but sometimes, we're over our head. And it's like that with a lot of things, people too sometimes. And anyway, it didn't work out very well. She had to be euthanized. So my adopted daughter gave me her pug to adopt, and I spoiled him and got him back in fighting shape. He was overweight and neglected. She was going through a lot, divorcing herself, and she had the 2 children. And So, and we gave him a really great life to the very end. And then I adopted 2 cats, and they've got, one was a yard rescue. You know, he came to the window. Moonflower, actually, his name is. He came on the flower moon, the native moon called the flower moon, and since then he's been in, but he's feral, but he's getting by, and he's just so much happier. So, I mean, I guess it's the best we can do, and I love the idea of the candle amends. For me, I always tell people, if somebody's deceased, you could always write a note, you can bury it, plant it in a flower garden or whatever, I'm really big on that. And then light a candle and have a conversation. I love that one. Because, I couldn't make an amends to my parents. They were deceased. So I did it that way. That was how I did it. And anyway, right now I'm going through a thing because my husband is off again, on marijuana and has emotional problems. And when he smokes, it's never good. He gets very depressed. And so even though I have a lot of sobriety, my mouth goes. And what I heard today really has helped me to be more loving and kind and, detached with love. It's the only thing one can do, because we're in the, the economic thing of being together like a lot of other people. You're in a home together, and when he's not in that condition, it's a different relationship. So I have to really pray that God guides me to keep away from the danger zone and going into the trap and reacting, if that makes any sense. I mean, I really wish I had a better thing to report, because I have a lot of years, but life goes on anyway, and it's the alcoholism of other people is equally cunning, baffling, and powerful. I mean, I go to Al-Anon meetings and I work that program, but still, I have to watch my defects because they get triggered. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Gloriana. Absolutely love you. All right, so just want to follow this up by saying, just remember, the best amends is changed behavior. And in any and all situations, consult with God, ask for the right thought or action and direction, and it will work out. You will figure it out. I think that's it for today. Next time we're talking financial amends, my personal favorite. Okay, perfect. I shall. Thank you. I will. Thank you, Sam. Okay, let's